Jupiter to transform into a new small sun,
Cool.
which is super awesome for the moons around Jupiter, which are considered to potentially be habitable if they just had the right sun and heat and all of that. So hey, woohoo! These moons are specifically Europa,
which has ice, right?
It does have ice.
Yeah.
I believe Europa is the one that has all the cracks because of something coming from the underside.
Out of the ice
they're red.
Yeah.
Am I correct in that?
I can't keep them all straight.
Okay.
And then there's enchilada. Don't forget enchilada.
Joe, you're actually pretty close because there are 30 some odd moons around Jupiter.
Oh yeah, it's got a lot of moons.
Yeah, there's Europa and Io are the big ones that everybody points to as being possibly habitable.
And then there's Ganymede, of course, which also, by the way, Arthur C. Clarke wrote a fun short story about many, many years ago, which I can't remember the name of. I think it was called The Sentinel, but it was kind of the basis for 2001. But interesting little story.
Nice.
Ganymede actually turns out to be this enormous spacecraft, and not a moon at all. And humanity gets out there.
That's no moon.
See, now there's a one that I heard a couple of years ago where Europa, because the ice, everybody thinks there's something living under the ice, like microscopic bacterial stuff. No, it turns out there's actually Kraken-sized creatures living under it. And every time we land on it, they suck the capsules with people down because, hey, look, crunchy shell, soft inside. It's like candy bar.
These only come along. Like once every billion years or so. So we better take advantage.
Yeah. Okay. Well, back to our story, the original story that we were talking about. The second Jupiter turns into a second sun. That sun is named Lucifer, but keep in mind, Lucifer isn't used in a negative connotation, which, if you've read spent any time around the Bible, the name Lucifer has a lot of negativity around it. Well, it's not that. Instead, it's a reflection of the fact that the word Lucifer, as an adjective in Latin, means light-bringing. Actually, turns out if it's a noun, it means morning star. And I know that I have heard Lucifer used in that way for both in... it's religious studies. People have talked about the morning star used to be called Lucifer, and you don't hear it that often, but that's where it comes from.
Okay.
I'm probably wrong, but that's off the cuff. So, I'm sure everybody is wondering why in the hell I just gave the plot to a book and a movie.
Dude.
Well,
we're not a film review podcast yet.
We're not that other podcast that does that.
Not linguistics either.
No. Well, it turns out, believe it or not, there are conspiracy theorists who believe that this is possible. Not only possible, but they claim that this is one of NASA's ongoing projects, and it's totally real.
Not with those budget cuts, it's not.
Yeah. Well...
Just saying.
Okay.
No.
So there's
so
credits we're going to cut now because we're done.
Great. Yeah. Perfect.
No,
it's actually, I mean, if they are capable of keeping this a secret, they can actually have a black budget too.
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
Yeah. And so,
yeah. All those weather satellites, not really weather satellites.
The budget might be a lot bigger than you think.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's all monopoly money at this point anyway.
That's a good point, yeah.
Anyway.
So let's jump into a little bit of science.
Yeah, like why would somebody think this was real?
Well, there is some real science to it, and then there's some pseudoscience. Let's just walk through all of that as quickly as possible here. So first off, Jupiter, like I said before, if you know anything about it, it's a gas giant.
Big planet.
It's a giant planet, and Jupiter as a gas giant is referred to sometimes as a failed star.
Which is kind of harsh in my opinion.
Yeah.
How do you think that makes Jupiter feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big,
subconscious.
Dopey. No, so what it basically means is that if Jupiter had more mass, then theoretically it could have become a star.
Well, so that's true for Earth too. Aren't we just as much a failed star? Huh?
No, but we don't have the gas to make the nuclear fusion. So no, we're not a star.
Totally
we are not
Jupiter's
a star.
side. Yeah.
We are like sea level.
Yeah.
Ha.
Yeah.
Okay, no. So anyway, back to actually going into the science here.
Yeah. Mass.
Mass. That is the huge problem, is that it doesn't have enough mass to be able to allow for sustained nuclear fusion. So instead, it's a gas giant. It doesn't have that ability. Now, sadly for Jupiter, it's calculated that depending on who does the math, it would need at least 90 times more mass than it has right now to become a star.
Yeah, I've heard as little as 80, maybe, perhaps.
Yeah, one source said
Maybe.
75. I mean,
Yeah.
it depends on who's doing the math, and it's you're splitting hairs at that point. To me,
Doesn't really
It's-
matter
it's-
because there ain't that much mass in the solar system because it's outside of the sun. They're just there.
Correct.
So, sorry.
There are a lot of other planets that are around the same size as Jupiter out there that have managed to achieve nuclear fusion. Those are what are referred to as a brown dwarf.
And those are actually, they're bigger than Jupiter, though.
They are. So when I read it and it's described, Jupiter is at the extreme low end of possibly becoming a brown dwarf.
And what I've heard is that
And
it's
the
way
word is
far
extreme,
below.
yeah.
I've heard that it's way far below. Like, I've heard that the minimum size for a brown dwarf is about 13 Jupiter masses.
I wouldn't be surprised
I mean,
by
in
that.
terms of actual size, it might be about the right size,
But it's
it
the
doesn't have the
mass.
mass. The mass is what matters.
So let's do this, because I am really bad when it comes to description of this stuff, and I think you're going to do a better job than I am, Joe.
I'll
Can
try.
you briefly, are you able to explain to people what mass means?
Yeah,
Versus
mass.
size.
Versus size, yes.
Versus size, yeah. Well, it's just like, it's real simple. I mean, take two balloons, blow one up with air from your mouth, and fill the other one with water from your faucet to about the same size. And you'll notice that even though they are the same size, one has different they have different masses, different
Weight?
different densities. So
Density, there's the word,
different
thank you.
densities, So one weighs more. So
Okay.
yeah.
So that's what we're getting at here. We're going to throw around the word mass a number of times going forward. So that's why
Yeah.
I was hoping that you had a good back of the envelope explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, and the reason mass is important in this context is because the more mass, the more gravity, and therefore the more it compresses itself, which is what you need for stars to exist. Is
Yes.
You need that massive pressure to be able to not only ignite that fusion reaction, but also keep it
Sustain
contained.
it. Yeah.
Because the key
That's-
point
yeah.
for a star is that the process of nuclear fusion is always pushing outwards, but the intense gravity of the mass of the star itself is always pulling it back in, and so it keeps it in this sort of perfect Goldilocks zone
Yeah.
where it's balanced. Now, eventually, through the process of nuclear fusion, stars like our sun eventually will burn up enough that its mass will reduce, its gravitational force will reduce, and suddenly it'll start spewing that stuff out, not being able to contain it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to get into the death cycle of a star.
And and don't get stressed about it. That's not supposed to happen for at least like 2 more years, right?
Yeah.
we got time.
It's trillions.
You got- you
it's
got time, like-
it's a number that is so big you'll never have to worry about it
Yeah.
again.
It's not trillions, but it's billions of years.
So,
It's a long way.
Brown dwarf, though.
different kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. Not
So-
like our sun is not. What
No.
our sun is just a
our sun is a star.
star.
It's a yellow dwarf.
Yellow
So
dwarf. Okay.
a brown dwarf does put out some radiance, but it's not in a spectrum. It's not very bright. It's not in the, for us. I don't believe it's actually in the visible spectrum we can see, but it's not a
Yeah.
shining star.
Yeah, some of them emit towards like the low end of
Like the oranges.
Yeah, oranges and reds and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, but not as much as our sun because they actually are fusing different elements. I don't think they have enough
Helium.
mass, and they don't have enough helium, etc., and hydrogen and stuff to actually have that kind of reaction. So they have a lower level kind of reaction, which is like deuterium and something else. I
So
can't
it's just
remember.
darker,
So
basically.
essentially, yeah, they don't put out as much heat
Okay.
and light.
Basically, not as hot.
Right.
Simple version.
Yeah.
But
Not
the-
nearly
But
as
also
hot.
not as bright, right? So it wouldn't illuminate the planets around it as much as well. Is that true?
yeah,
That would be true.
Or it would
It
with a
doesn't-
different color light?
With different levels, different kinds of radiation. So life on another planet around a brown dwarf would look a lot different. The planets would not be green, I'm assuming. They
Yeah.
would be something else. But
Be something akin to like Krypton. from the Superman comics. His star was a different color, so when he came here, he had all of these things, blah, blah, blah. But that's kind of the way they could see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
They can-
again,
they can
comic books,
sustain-
great reference.
Yeah. And actually, they can't sustain life. It's just the planet's going to have to be a lot closer to it than we
Like
are to
a
our
moon
sun.
might be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That science having been covered, here's what our friendly neighborhood conspiracy theorists feel is actually going on, or believe is actually going on, is they think that the lack of mass in Jupiter could be solved by simply adding nuclear fuel to it. So this supposedly would jumpstart the process of nuclear fusion. And again, remember, the process of nuclear fusion is what creates the radiance of a star. It's what sends out the light and the heat radiation. Point out that sometimes when you're doing the reading, Jupiter's not the only planet that is referenced. You will also see Saturn brought up in this discussion. I'm going to leave Saturn out for now. When we talk about this, we're still only going to be talking about Jupiter. Eventually we'll talk about Saturn, but from here until I say again, it's all Jupiter all the time.
Should be. I mean, Saturn is like a lot smaller than Jupiter, actually.
That's probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this planet and we're going to start nuclear fusion. So how are we going to do it? Well, it turns out that we're going to use NASA's probes. That's how we're going to do it.
Duh.
Because there's Galileo, Cassini, and Voyager, and a whole bunch of others in the deep space fleet that could do this, and there's a good reason for it. The way a deep space probe works is once you get past Mars, there really isn't...
You run out of extension cord. And, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
No, it turns out once you get past Mars, the problem is that you cannot rely on solar panels to create enough electrical fuel for the satellites to work. So they have to have a different source. And that different source is what is called an RTG. That stands for radioisotope thermoelectric generator.
I'm glad you're the one who had to say that, not me.
Yeah, well, sometimes I do things right, not often. So that is their fuel source. And actually, a bit of current pop culture is if you ever read Andy Weir's The Martian, you actually might be
Or
familiar.
saw the movie.
Well, actually, I don't think they went into the RTG that much in the movie.
I didn't
think
see
so.
either because, previously mentioned, I don't like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah, you hate the Lost
I
in
really
Space
hate
movies.
them.
Yeah, these
Yes.
RTGs are cool, pretty cool little units. I really would love to have one myself.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
No, not at all.
Why not?
Okay, here's why. Joe, I don't want one because here's the problem is that RTGs are radioactive.
Yeah.
And putting off radiation is not good for you.
Bigger, you grow an extra arm. There's all
You
kinds
turn
of cool
green.
stuff.
Yeah,
There's all
no,
kinds of cool
no.
uses
Yeah,
for
and then you
radiation.
start to waste away and die.
Yeah.
A horrible,
okay.
miserable death.
So here's how an RTG works.
Okay.
RTGs use plutonium-238. It's in pellet form, and the heat from the radioactive elements, that radioactive process that's in the plutonium, it goes through a thermocoupler, which is a material that produces a direct electrical current when heat is applied to it. So it's using the heat to create electricity.
It's like it's like a solar panel, but it uses heat instead of light.
Yes,
But
that's absolutely right. The nice thing about the RTGs, why they're so popular, is that they have no moving parts. So there's nothing to break in that fashion. They're super simple. For instance, the Galileo space probe, it had 2 RTGs on board, which gave it all the power it needed and was carrying approximately 17 pounds of plutonium-238. So it's a small load to get lots of energy from.
yeah, I've heard that the Russians used quite a few of these just for powering lighthouses up like in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
used
do.
a bunch
It's
of them up
hundreds of miles of cabling. It's got electricity running through it, and that's how the electricity is generated.
That's what we used to tell people on the cruise ship. If you didn't know that I worked on a cruise ship.
No, I didn't know that.
People would ask, like, do you have to gas up or anything like that? And
We'd say, no, nuclear
first
power.
mate, he always said, oh yeah, no, what you can't see is the extension cord. that we run
on the ocean
Or
floor.
the ocean, the ocean floor.
Like, you're actually running on little tracks with little brushes, like, well, remember slot cars when you were a kid? Yeah, there's little tracks down
That's
there.
how it works.
Okay.
Yeah. That's how we're going to do space travel from now on. Just put tracks everywhere.
So people would actually ask you guys if you had to, like, refuel.
Yeah.
They really did ask you that.
They really
huh?
did.
Really?
People's stupidity has no bounds.
I guess not. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, let's move away
talking
from
about
the
Jupiter.
Yes,
Yeah.
let's go back to it. Okay, so far we've talked about how Jupiter works. We've talked about how the power for space probes works. In a second, we're going to talk about how that's going to apply to Project Lucifer.
Yeah,
to make a big second sun in our solar system.
but
Yay!
like why?
Yes,
Right.
that's the key
Good
question.
question.
So
But why, though?
why go through all of this effort? The reason is it is what we talked about before with Ganymede and what was the other?
Enchilada.
Europa and
Europa.
Enchilada.
Yes. Okay, the idea is that the reason to do this is to create other habitable worlds in our local solar system. So it's a new planet that would be habitable that we could then, send whatever we wanted there and turn it into whatever we wanted. And it's literally, months away by current today's spacecraft technology. So it's pretty damn close.
But wouldn't it mess up our solar system?
Not necessarily.
We'll talk about that
Okay.
later. That's the issues with this.
It
but
seems
we'll
like
talk
that
about
would kind of mess
later.
it up a little bit.
It depends on how you do it.
Yeah. So okay.
If you do it in the way that's scientifically possible, yes, it would.
Yeah.
If you do it in the way they're talking about, no,
with
it
monoliths.
wouldn't. Yeah. It would not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That's fine. Sorry. I just I keep asking myself why would we want to do this?
Yeah.
But, all right.
No, that's a completely valid question.
Okay.
I've asked that a lot.
Yeah. But why though?
Okay.
No, actually, there's fun reasons.
Okay.
So, the supporters of Project Lucifer, for the RTGs that we were just talking about before we went off on that, they say that Project Lucifer is going to be using the radioactive material that is in the RTGs to create an atomic bomb when they crash the craft into the atmosphere of the planet. And once it's fallen far enough into the gas giant, the high pressures at the depths of it are going to ignite it into a nuclear reaction, at which point it's then going to be able to create a sustained nuclear fusion situation.
All of them? We're doing that with all of them? Or just one payload?
They would
we just need one to work.
One payload, I mean.
Just one payload to work, yes. One, we just got to get that one spot on in the right,
So there's
the
about
right job.
34 pounds of that stuff on the probe, right?
It depends on the probe on how much there is. So like when we were talking just a minute ago about Galileo, it's got 17 pounds.
I thought it had two RTGs with 17 pounds each.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. It's 17 pounds a piece.
34 pounds total.
Yeah.
So enough to remake Jupiter, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the key here is that it's the pressure of Jupiter. That's what's going to do it. Because if, we set off nuclear bombs on this planet, and our planet is not a star. We didn't have uncontrolled nuclear fusion because it burned out. There was nothing to contain it.
Right.
So at that low depths, that's where they're saying that's going to allow it to hold that process going. I know it's kooky science. I see the look on your face.
Yeah,
I'm at the point right now in this episode where I'm thinking, well, am I so naive about science that I literally don't understand that, or is this just that bad of science? I don't know.
Well, it's one of the things you got to know about Jupiter is that it doesn't have a similar. Its atmosphere is a lot deeper than ours,
right?
And so at the surface, wherever the surface is, if it even exists, we're not even totally sure about that.
Yeah.
The pressures are going to be tremendously high. Whether they're high enough to sustain and actually contain a fusion reaction, well, that's a different story.
Right.
But they are extremely high
Okay.
by our earthly standards.
So it's not bad science. I'm just a bad scientist.
I'm not,
No, I don't know that the answer is yes
that.
to either of those,
Okay.
or both of those
All right.
exclusively.
That's fair.
I wouldn't say it's not bad science. No,
Okay.
I wouldn't say that.
So, crash a probe into the planet, It explodes. It creates this gas giant nuclear fusion sustained reaction, turns Jupiter into another star through this runaway nuclear fusion process, and voila, we've got all these habitable worlds.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not as if, as scary and crazy it might sound, it's not like they've ever tried it, or have they? Because this is what has really got people going, is back in 2003, Galileo, the spacecraft, the probe, I keep calling it a probe. I don't actually really know if probe is the right word. It's a spacecraft, though.
Probe works. It's an exploratory spacecraft.
Okay.
It's an identified flying object.
It is an identified flying object. Well,
to us, not to the Jovians.
True.
Yeah.
Well, Galileo it'd been on its mission for many, many years, and it was running out of fuel. The reaction, it could not sustain it much longer in its RTGs. So what NASA decided to do, and this is their official reason, is they said, listen, we don't want it to crash into one of the moons and potentially contaminate it with bacteria or anything like that from planet Earth. We want to keep it pure and pristine in its own way. So what we're going to do is instead we're going to crash it into Jupiter and destroy it that way, getting rid of any nasty hitchhikers, because who wants Earth crap on their planet?
Well, in my brain, I think if they were actually trying to colonize the moons as planets, it would maybe be helpful to start putting Earth bacteria on there. But on the other hand, as somebody who's interested in trying to find those things unique to other places, that makes a lot of sense.
Contaminating,
right?
That's
you would not want, so you know for sure if you find that bacteria there, it evolved, autonomously from something that we did.
Well, and plus also you want to actually, if you're going to do that, do a controlled thing where you actually introduce bacteria that you want to do, rather than, in this case, I think it was just whatever stray crap was laying around the lab that hitched aboard that thing. So it could be some negative
granted,
stuff.
the labs are clean, but once it gets to the launch site and it gets launched, there's
stuff thrown
things
on
can get in there.
Yeah, and then there's Freddie who's coming down with the flu who sneezed on it, and stuff like that. Do you want influenza viruses like replicating on
on their own? No.
I'd say no. Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So our friendly neighborhood conspiracy theorists, they see this act of crashing Galileo into Jupiter, and they say, aha! That is evidence that you are trying to make Project Lucifer happen. That's what's going on.
Except...
Okay.
Well, but... didn't they just disprove their own theory, right? They were like, all you have to do is crash one probe into there and blah, 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 blah. So NASA crashed a probe into there, and what happened?
Well...
Nothing!
That's because they're screw-ups.
Oh.
They're screw-ups. They tried, and they didn't quite do it this time, but they'll succeed next time.
Remember, just because they crash it in there doesn't mean it's going to happen. They have to do it right. So bear with me through this. Like I said, they believed that as it went through to the depths of Jupiter, the pressure was going to set off the plutonium in the RTG, and we were going to get this nuclear reaction. And of course, NASA, holding up their end of the cover-up, has always said, duh, that's not possible, dude. To which case they've said, duh, stop lying to us.
Exactly.
Well, thankfully,
NASA seems just a little bit too eager to quell these rumors.
Yeah. And thankfully, NASA was bad at what they were trying to do because nothing actually happened, right?
Oh, yeah, I know.
Wrong again, dummy.
Wrong again. Because a month or so after Galileo went down into the atmosphere of Jupiter, a dark spot appeared on Jupiter.
Wow.
About a month later, there was this giant Earth-sized dark spot. So we were able to observe this.
I was going to ask if it was monolith-shaped.
No. It was a circle, but it was huge.
Actually, it was large. Although it looked to me like it was probably a shadow cast by one of Jupiter's moons.
Well, but it was
like
moving, so people said it was. Our friendly neighborhood conspiracy theorists said that is a proof that it worked. The plutonium exploded. It went off. It just did not create a sustained nuclear reaction. So there was this big plume, and that's what came to the surface. Scientists have instead said, as Joe just pointed out, it was a shadow, or others have said it was on the equator of Jupiter, which it turns out is amazingly turbulent. And they're like,
it was weather. Yeah.
It was some kind of crazy storm.
Giant storm.
Planet-sized storm, which I don't want to be in the middle of.
Oh, no. Yeah, I'm sure weather is quite fun on Jupiter.
Yeah. That's maybe another reason to turn it into a sun is so we don't ever have to deal with the weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because, we were so going to go down there.
Yeah, totally we were.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like we've gotten everything across in terms of what the story is. I feel like maybe it might be a little bit confusing, so I'm just going to do what I don't normally do, which is just the briefest of recaps.
Okay.
Drop a nuclear bomb of some shape or form.
They say
into the atmosphere of Jupiter. That's going to go off. That's going to create a nuclear reaction, which is going to turn it into a sun.
Which would be cool.
That would be hot. Which would then also allow that nuclear reaction turning into a sun would turn the moons of Jupiter into habitable worlds.
Eventually.
And proof is that we dropped a spacecraft into it, and oh look, we got this giant dark spot that proves that it went off. We just didn't achieve sustained reaction.
Well,
so this is a recap of the conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
the whole thing, yeah.
And that might explain why NASA is currently working on what they call the big-ass probe, which is like 20 times bigger than the Galileo. And enough.
Okay, so that is our story. We are now going to get into theories, but before we do that, let's take a quick break. If anyone had a zeal for food, it was Kerouac. That man loved food, and the way he described it, how could you not love it as well? Just show me the bluefish spangle on a seafood menu and I'd eat it. Let me smell the drawn butter and lobster claws. There were places where they specialized in thick red roast beef au jus, or roast chicken basted in wine. There were places where hamburgers sizzled on grills and the coffee was only a nickel. And oh, that pan-fried chow mein flavored air that blew into my room from Chinatown, vying with the spaghetti sauces of North Beach, the soft-shell crab of Fisherman's Wharf, nay, the ribs of Fillmore turning on spits. Throw in Market Street chili beans, red-hot and French-fried potatoes from the Embarcadero Wino Night, and steamed clams from Sausalito across the bay, and there's my odd dream of San Francisco. The great thing is, you don't have to travel to eat like that. You can do it from the comfort of your own home with HelloFresh. We've had HelloFresh. They sent it to us, and I loved it. Good food all around. If you'd like to try HelloFresh, they've extended to our listeners a special offer. If you go to their website and use the promo code Sideways30, that's Sideways30, and you'll get $30 off your first week of deliveries. So go to HelloFresh.com and enter Sideways30 when you subscribe. And remember, HelloFresh has delicious ingredients you'll love to eat and simple recipes you'll love to cook. And we're back.
But why though?
Yeah, that's our first section of the theories portion is, so why do this? And we briefly covered this a little bit before. And the answer is to play God, of course. Duh. So the idea that some organization, which wants to set up a planet on its own terms, isn't all that far-fetched according to a lot of the stuff that we have read. I mean, we've heard about these societies that want to change governments on this planet, so why is it so far-fetched that somebody might say, hey, let's just take our ball and leave and set up our own somewhere else?
There are plenty of dystopian movies and books about this very sort of thing, where the elite get live off planet and everybody else suffers below or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing is that so that this society, or this group that wants to create a new society, I should say, they want to move everybody who is worthwhile, and I use air quotes around the word worthwhile. I don't know what their criteria is.
Money.
But they're going to use them to repopulate these newly habitable moons around this new sun of Jupiter, or the new sun that is made from Jupiter, Lucifer. and they're going to make their own civilization. They're not going to have any of that riffraff that this planet is just bogged down with, or any of those crappy processes. You know, they're not going to have any of that stuff.
I think they're going to be really upset when they find out you can't have a society without people who are kind of dumb. And
the TPS report will always live on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, but you know, any off-planet society, they're going to leave most of the riffraff behind anyway, because when you're looking to take somebody to your new colony, obviously you're not going to recruit high school dropouts with no skills. And you're not going to recruit homeless people and heroin addicts.
Well,
so,
but wait, but you know what? Manual labor has to be done.
That's what I'm saying.
Nothing happens without some guy cleaning out the slop pens and turning a wrench. Those things still have to happen.
But you're probably not going to recruit people who have a penchant for murder.